Hi folks, Rob Goller here. Thanks for joining me for our weekly chat about local history. This week I wanted to chat a little bit more about West Falls. I had the opportunity, I was invited by the Historical Society to give a brief history. I had said during the presentation last week, and if you didn't get to see it, I hope to be able to do it again. I had said during that presentation that there's just so many stories and so much history about West Falls that I was, just getting the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the history of that hamlet. And for those of you who might not be from East Aurora area or the town of Aurora or West Falls, um, uh, West Falls is a hamlet within the town. And I discovered as I was putting together the presentation, it was a presentation I had done years ago and I was updating it, and we didn't even think of this, that the reason I was asked to talk about West Falls is because of all the activity that's happening up there. There's, new road construction. There's a grant program to revitalize the hamlet. So that's why the topic came up as an idea for the Historical Society speaker series. But as I was doing the research, I realized that an important date in West Falls history happened coincidentally, or perhaps serendipitously, 175 years ago this year. 1849 was an incredibly important year for the history of West Falls. And I had argued during the program, and today I will argue as well, that if you are looking for a date to celebrate to mark the founding, the beginning of West Falls, 1849 would be a good date. Now, when we talk about towns and villages, there are specific dates. If you want to have an anniversary celebration, there are specific dates. For instance, the town was chartered as Aurora in 1818, became Aurora in 1819 the following year. The village of East Aurora was incorporated in 1874. We have a specific date. There were specific votes of the state legislature, Erie County Board of Supervisors, and the local residents. So we have specific dates because those government entities were founded on specific dates. Now, towns and villages are actual government entities. There are boundary lines. Hamlets aren't. They are communities within towns, but the government, there is no separate government. There is no separate jurisdiction. So the hamlets are just have more heavily populated areas within the towns. And the hamlets are served by the town board. That's the lowest level of government for a hamlet. So there really isn't a founding date for hamlets. You can't really pinpoint a specific date that a hamlet like West Falls or South Wales or any of these other hamlets that are around were founded. So, and West Falls is a hamlet, not like the village of East Aurora, which has a separate government. It's a hamlet within the town of Aurora. So as I was researching, I thought this date 1849 kept popping up, and I thought that would be the date you would pick, even though there were settlements way decades before that, into the early 1800s. 1849 would be a really interesting date to celebrate. And then it dawned on me that that was 175 years ago. Actually, someone else pointed it out to me. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. So 1849 is important to West Falls. And again, for those who don't know, who aren't maybe from East Aurora, and this could apply to any hamlet if you wanted to dig back into the history. But in this particular case, West Falls, a really neat place, lots going on, is in the southwestern corner of the town of Aurora. And it overlaps into the town of Colden. And as I spoke about last week, it developed because of the mills, and there's Cazenovia Creek that goes through it, and of course lots of developments built where there was water. And so that's how the early settlement occurred in West Falls. But it had originally been known as Crockershire because a Mr. Crocker lived there. And then for about a 10-year period in the 1840s, it was known as Florence. The local people who lived there, the theory being that there were a lot of Italian immigrants, and that they named it after, or could have been another reason, but they named it Florence. Well, in 1849, one of the reasons that they needed to change the name was because, actually the principal reason they had to change the name to West Falls was they went to apply to be a post office. Now, 1849, the two reasons it's important is the Cattaraugus-Buffalo Plank Road came through, and then the post office within months. So I'll start with the Plank Road, and I argue that the Plank Road was the reason that West Falls remained on a route that was so important. Plank Road to connect Springville to Buffalo, and it was actually rare to have a plank road. There was one through East Aurora as well around the same time, and that opened up commerce and travel through West Falls. So this hamlet that may not have gotten attention, may have not had a lot of business prosperity, ended up being prosperous because this plank road, this trade route, literally went through the hamlet. And so this opened in 1849, April 28th of 1849, as a matter of fact. And I would argue that that's the reason why West Falls became a place on the map. The plank road led to a brick road later, because when cars came along, you couldn't drive cars on dirt or on planks. And then the railroad, which came later than that, followed the same route. And so the plank road wasn't there to begin with. Perhaps those other modes of transportation wouldn't have come along. So that's one reason why I think you could celebrate 1849 as the birth of West Falls. The second, perhaps more importantly, is that West Falls literally became West Falls on September 22nd of 1849. And the reason we know that specific date is because the Postal Service keeps detailed records. And the community of West Falls had applied to get a post office, and they were named Florence, and they wanted to be the Florence post office, but the Postal Service said, no, you can't do that, because there was already a Florence, New York, and you could not have two post offices by the same name. It's the similar reason why East Aurora is East Aurora and not Aurora, because there was already Aurora in the Finger Lakes, and I talked about that before. But similar thing happened in West Falls. So they couldn't have the name Florence, and so with the waterfalls that were up on the hill outside the hamlet, they named, and it was in the western end of the town, they named their community West Falls, and the post office took that name. And ever since, the hamlet of Florence and Crockershire became West Falls, and it's been named West Falls ever since, September 22nd, 1849. So those two events, which weren't coincidental, as a matter of fact, the community was growing, and hotels came out. There was actually a point where there were 3 or 4 hotels in that small hamlet of West Falls, because people needed to stay overnight if they were traveling. All that was spurred in 1849, and I would argue that that's the anniversary date if you wanted to celebrate West Falls. The very important plank road that went through, and of course the establishment of the first post office there, and the actual name West Falls on September 22nd, 1849. As a interesting note is, as I was researching, I found it very easy, actually, to find the postal history and the plank road history. And I'm going to do a lot more. I've been talking to a couple people, and I'm intrigued by the plank roads. They were actually owned by private businesses, and so I'm going to be doing a lot more research into those. But those were there was one through East Aurora and a separate one through West Falls. And they changed the economy of the local communities. And then the companies went either bankrupt or just abandoned those plank roads, and they became a nuisance actually after a while. But 1849 is the date, 175 years ago this year, and so West Falls has reason to celebrate an important anniversary. So happy 175th anniversary to West Falls. And thanks to the folks who brought that to my attention, that it was 175 years ago, as I was talking about that important date of 1849. Again, thank you for joining me. I am Robert Lowell Goller. I am the Town and Village Historian, but these videos and a lot of my research are not connected officially with my duties as Town and Village Historian. Thank you for the ideas. I have a lot more ideas coming up. I'm getting a lot of questions. I could do a video every day if I had the time, but some of the topics we're going to be talking about, someone asked me about the Ku Klux Klan in East Aurora, so we're going to talk about that in the coming weeks. Prohibition and speakeasies in our area, so I'll be talking about those in the next couple weeks. Again, thanks for joining me. Thank you for keeping history alive. And if you have any comments or questions or topic ideas, you know where to put them in the comment section or send me a private message. Thanks and take care. We'll see you next time.